Imagine spending 5 years of your life rebuilding your family's lake house with your own hands and money, only to have your brothers show up and treat it like their personal vacation home. Then they tell you that you can't use it for your own anniversary because they're throwing a teenage kegger there. That's exactly what happened to me. But instead of getting angry, I did something they never saw coming. Something that would cost them everything. If you believe in karma, hit that like button and subscribe. The drive was my therapy. Every Friday afternoon, like clockwork, I'd leave the dust of the city construction site behind and point my old pickup truck north. 3 hours. That was the price of admission to my own personal sanctuary. Or what it would become. My name is Jake. For 25 years I've made a living building things. As a construction manager, I've looked down from steel girders 40 stories high, watching a city skyline rise from a blueprint into reality. I know the weight of concrete, the smell of fresh-cut lumber, the satisfying click of a perfectly leveled beam. I build the dreams of strangers for a paycheck. But the project that lived in my heart, the one that truly mattered, wasn't a skyscraper. It was a wreck. The old lake house was my grandfather's legacy, left to my 2 brothers, and me. For Mark and David, it was a burden, a moldering reminder of a past they'd rather forget. A financial footnote to be dealt with eventually. For me, it was everything. It was the smell of pine needles and grilling burgers, the sound of my grandfather's laugh echoing off the water, the feeling of the sun-warped wooden dock under my bare feet. It was the last, best piece of my childhood. The first time I saw it as an adult, my heart sank. Time and neglect had not been kind. The white paint was a memory, peeled away to reveal gray, rotting wood. The front porch sagged like a tired smile. The roof, God, the roof. I could count 4 separate places where the sky peeked through, each one a promise of a future leak. My brothers stood beside me that day, hands in the pockets of their expensive suits. "Tear down," Mark said, a lawyer's finality in his voice. "The land's the only thing with value. Split it 3 ways. Sell it to a developer." David nodded, already checking his phone. "We'll never get our money back any other way. It's a money pit." I just stared at the structure. I didn't see a money pit. I saw the skeleton of a home. I saw what it could be. "I'll buy you out," I said, the words leaving my mouth before I'd even thought them through. They laughed. Not a mean laugh, but the laugh of 2 pragmatic men humoring their sentimental younger brother. "With what, Jake?" David asked. "Your construction manager's salary? Mark and I are partners at the firm. We'll give you a fair price for your third." But I couldn't. Selling felt like selling a piece of my grandfather's soul, so I made a different offer. "Let me handle it. Let me fix it up. I'll do the work. You don't have to lift a finger." The relief on their faces was palpable. They dodged a tedious obligation. They agreed instantly, a handshake deal between brothers. It was the last time we'd ever be on equal footing. And so the pilgrimage began. Every weekend, every holiday, every scrap of vacation time. While Mark was swamped at the firm and David had a standing golf game he just couldn't miss, I was alone with the silence and the sweat. I poured my own paycheck into 2x4s and sheets of drywall. I spent my evenings studying YouTube videos on plumbing and electrical work, my city-smart hands learning the rustic trades of a country carpenter. I replaced the foundation, stone by backbreaking stone. I rewired the entire house, room by room, until my fingers were raw and my forearms were mapped with tiny burns from the soldering iron. I taught myself to sweat copper pipes, to hang drywall, to lay a floor so level you could roll a marble across it. I was the architect, the engineer, the foreman, and the laborer. For 5 years, that house was my second job, my secret mistress, my life's work. And through it all, the radio silence from my brothers was a constant. An occasional text. "How's the money pit coming along?" A joke at a family dinner about me wasting my time. They were living their lives of luxury, of important client meetings and country club lunches, while I bled my savings and my spirit into that soil. Then, one summer weekend, it was done. The last piece of trim was nailed in place. The final coat of stain dried on the sprawling new deck. The brand new dock stretched out into the lake like an invitation. The rotting shack had been transformed into a beautiful, 4-bedroom cedar-clad cabin. I stood on that deck, looking out at the water, and for the first time, I felt a peace so profound, it almost brought me to tears. I had done it. And as if summoned by some dark magic of entitlement, my brothers arrived. Their Mercedes and BMWs crunched up the newly graveled driveway. They emerged, not with tools or supplies, but with coolers of beer and designer luggage. They walked through the door without knocking. "Wow, Jake, you actually did it," Mark said, running a hand over the custom-built kitchen island I'd spent a month on. "It doesn't suck." David was already opening the French doors to the deck. "This is perfect. The guys at the firm are going to love this place." Just like that, it was no longer my project. It was their resort. They started showing up every other weekend with their families, their friends, their clients. They'd leave behind a war zone of empty bottles, piles of sandy, wet towels on the hardwood floors I'd refinished, refrigerators full of spoiled food that I would have to clean out. Once, David left a broken jet ski beached on the shore, and I had to pay $200 to have it hauled away. I was the invisible janitor, the ghost caretaker. They never offered to contribute to the skyrocketing property taxes I was paying. They never mentioned the insurance, the utilities, the endless upkeep. When I gently, foolishly brought it up once, Mark just clapped me on the back and laughed. "Come on, Jake, relax. It's the family house. It's for everyone." The words sounded right, noble even, but they rang hollow, because I was the only one who had ever believed it was a family. I was the only one giving. They were the only ones taking. The resentment began as a slow burn, a low heat in the pit of my stomach, fed every weekend by another mess, another thoughtless comment, another entitled assumption. I was building something else now, brick by bitter brick. Not a house. A wall. And behind that wall, the first blueprints of a reckoning were beginning to take shape. The wall inside me grew higher, stronger, every weekend. It was built from their discarded bottle caps ground into the deck boards, from the ghostly rings of red wine on the oak table I'd stripped and sanded for a week. It was mortared with their casual, offhand comments. "We're thinking of hosting the partners' retreat here next month," Mark said one Sunday as he handed me a full trash bag on his way out. "Might need to put in a hot tub on that deck of yours." My deck. He didn't even hear it. He didn't see me. He saw a function, a convenience. The breaking point didn't arrive with a scream. It didn't come with a slammed door or a thrown punch. It came on a silent, overcast Tuesday. I'd taken a rare midweek day off, a personal day, just for me. No city noise, no brothers, no pretense. Just the lake, the loons, and the house. My house. I pulled up the driveway, and the peace I'd been craving evaporated instantly. David's BMW was there. He wasn't supposed to be here. No one was. I found him inside, not relaxing, but working. His laptop was open on the kitchen island, a spreadsheet glowing on the screen. He had a tape measure stretched across the living room floor. "David? What's going on?" He jumped, startled, then flashed me a salesman's smile. "Jake, perfect timing. Didn't expect you." "I own the place," I said, the words flat and cold. "I'm here a lot." Right. He waved a hand, already dismissing me. "Look, I'm just getting some measurements. We're finalizing the plans." "What plans?" "The addition," he said, as if it were the most obvious thing in the world. "Mark didn't tell you? We're going to enclose the side porch, expand the master suite out over the garage. It's going to add a ton of value." The air left my lungs. I looked at the wall he was pointing to. The wall I had framed, insulated, and sheetrocked myself. The wall where, 5 years ago, I'd carved my initials and my grandfather's into a stud before sealing it away, a secret tribute to the two of us who truly loved this place. "You're... what?" "It's a no-brainer, Jake. We've got a guy from the firm's client list, a contractor. He can start next month. We'll have it done before the first snow." We. The word was a spark landing on a 5-year-old pile of dry, bitter tinder. "You are not touching this house," I said. My voice was quiet, a low vibration. It didn't sound like me. David finally looked at me, really looked. He saw the sawdust on my jeans, the old stain on my t-shirt. He saw the labor, and his expression shifted from enthusiasm to condescending. Pity. Come on, don't be like that. It's an improvement. We're not asking you to do the work this time. We'll hire it out. You should be happy. Happy? The word was ash in my mouth. You think you can just show up with your tape measure and your contractor and start tearing apart the walls I built? Without even asking me? Asking you? He chuckled, a dry, hollow sound. Jake, it's not just your house. It's the family house. Mark and I have a say, too. We've decided. That was it. The final stone placed on the wall. The last brick. We've decided. They'd decided nothing for 5 years. They'd decided to be absent. They'd decided to mock and belittle. They'd decided to consume and not contribute. And now, seeing the finished product, seeing the value created entirely, by my sweat and sacrifice, they had decided to improve it. To make it theirs. I looked at his tasseled loafers on the hardwood floor I had laid. I looked at his expensive watch, the kind you buy with the money you save by not paying a single property tax bill for half a decade. I saw the ghost of my grandfather in the corner, shaking his head in disappointment at the men his other grandsons had become. The heat in my stomach didn't flare. It didn't explode. It crystallized. It turned cold and hard and absolutely still. The blueprints of a reckoning, once vague sketches in my mind, snapped into perfect, sharp, terrifying focus. I smiled. It was a strange, foreign feeling on my face. You're right, I said, my voice now eerily calm. You're absolutely right, David. He looked surprised, then smug. He'd won. He'd put me in my place. It is the family house, I continued. And family should make these decisions together. You and Mark should absolutely move forward with your plans. His smile widened. Great. I knew you'd see it our way. I do, I said, walking toward the door. I see everything perfectly clearly now. I left him there with his tape measure. I got in my truck, and I didn't look back at the house. I didn't feel anger anymore. I didn't feel resentment. I felt nothing but a cold, silent, surgical resolve. The time for building was over. The time for drawing up plans was done. It was time to send them a bill. The drive was a blur of gray sky and green pines, but my mind was a hyper-focused, crystalline machine. The cold, surgical resolve that had taken root in my chest didn't throb or ache. It hummed. It was a quiet, powerful engine. And for the first time in years, I was in the driver's seat. I didn't go home to my city apartment. I drove to the one place where I could think, where the ghosts of their laughter couldn't reach me. My workshop. It was a rented garage unit on the edge of town, smelling of sawdust, linseed oil, and silence. This was where I'd built the cabinets for the lake house, where I'd repaired the antique rockers for the porch, where I'd come to remember what my hands could do when they weren't holding a trash bag for someone else. I killed the engine and sat in the echoing quiet. The first drop of rain hit the windshield, then another. Soon, a soft drumming filled the space, a perfect isolating white noise. We've decided. The words weren't a sting anymore. They were a catalyst. They were the key that had finally unlocked the door I'd been too afraid, too conditioned, to open. I pulled out my phone, opened a blank note, and titled it, with a grim smile, The Invoice. It wasn't about emotion. It was about data. It was about the cold, hard math they worshipped. They saw a balance sheet. Fine. I would give them one. I started with the big stuff, the numbers they would understand. I calculated the property taxes for 5 years. I had every bill, digital and paper, filed away in a drawer I called the Mausoleum of Responsibility. I added them up. The total was a punch in the gut, a staggering sum I had quietly paid. Alone, I typed the number. It looked like a phone number from a foreign country. Next, insurance. 5 years of premiums on a property they co-owned, but I alone maintained. I added that figure. The number on the screen grew, bloated and ugly. Then, the utilities. The electricity that powered their weekends of leisure. The propane that heated their hot showers and fueled the grill where they charred their expensive steaks. The internet they used to check in with the office while pretending to get away from it all. I estimated it conservatively. Even a conservative estimate was $1,000 a year. 5 years. Another number added to the growing total. But that was just the money they hadn't paid. That was the passive consumption. The real cost was in the active investment. My investment. I opened a second note. This one was titled Sweat Equity. This was the language they wouldn't understand, but I needed to see it. I needed to quantify the invisible labor they had so casually exploited. I listed every project, not in sentences, in bullet points. Cold, hard facts. Full interior-exterior paint, 3 coats, 300 man-hours. Refinish all hardwood floors, sand, stain, poly, 200 man-hours. Rebuild deck, demo old, pour new footings, frame, decking, rail, 175 man-hours. New roof, tear off, sheathing, shingles, 120 man-hours. Kitchen remodel, custom cabinets, countertops, tile, plumbing, electrical, 400 plus man-hours. The list scrolled on, a dizzying testament to 5 years of my life. My weekends, my vacations, my evenings. My blood, my sweat, my quiet pride, all reduced to a staggering column of hours. I did the math. What would a general contractor charge for this? Not some guy from the firm's client list, but a fair professional rate. I landed on a number. $85 an hour. It was low, but it was a number they couldn't argue was inflated. I multiplied the total hours by 85. The figure that appeared on the screen wasn't a number anymore. It was a monument. It was a brutal, undeniable testament to my value. It was more than the original purchase price of the house. I sat back, the rain still drumming its quiet rhythm on the roof. The 2 numbers stared back at me from my phone, the bill for their financial negligence and the invoice for my physical and creative labor. The cold engine in my chest revved. The plan was no longer a blueprint. It was a set of executable commands. It started not with a shout, but with a click. I found the website for the lake house's security system, a system I had installed alone, whose monthly fee I paid alone. With a few taps, I deleted David's and Mark's digital keys. Their access codes vanished from the server. The house, my house, was now digitally locked to them. They just didn't know it yet. Next, the utilities. I logged into the electric company's portal. I navigated to the Authorized Users section. Their names were there, a relic from when we'd first bought the place, and I'd tried to pretend this was a joint venture. I selected both names and clicked Remove. A confirmation dialog popped up. Are you sure you want to remove these users? They will no longer be able to discuss or manage this account. I was sure. I clicked Yes. I repeated the process for the propane company, the internet provider, the water and septic service. One by one, I severed their digital lifelines to the property. They were now strangers to every company that kept the lights on and the water flowing. If they had a question, a problem, a complaint, they'd have to call me. The final call was the hardest, because it required my voice. It required a performance. The coldness in my chest was my script. I found the number for the local property management company we'd used once, years ago, when a pipe had burst in winter and I'd been out of the country. Mark had found them. They were efficient, he'd said. They charged a fortune. A woman named Brenda answered with a cheerful, "Thanks for calling Blue Pine Properties, this is Brenda." "Hi, Brenda," I said, my voice a perfect, calm flatline. "This is Jake Sorensen regarding the property on Birch Lake." "Of course, Mr. Sorensen. What can I do for you?" "I need to update the access list," I said smoothly. "My brothers won't be involved with the property anymore. From now on, all communication, all decisions, all everything goes only to me. I am the sole point of contact." "Okay," she said, her keyboard clacking. "So, just to confirm, we should remove Mark and David Sorensen from the account entirely?" "That's correct," I said. "Effective immediately." "You got it. All done. Is there anything else?" "No, Brenda. That's all. Thank you." I ended the call. I looked at my phone. The list of actions was complete. For now. The rain had softened to a drizzle. I slid out of the truck and walked into my workshop. I didn't turn on the main light. I flicked on the old task lamp over my workbench, its light creating a pool of gold in the dimness. On the bench lay the project I'd been working on for myself, a small jewelry box of curly maple, dovetailed together with a precision that required absolute focus. It was for no one. It had no client, no deadline, no brother's approval to seek. It was just for the sake of the craft. I picked up a piece of 220 grit sandpaper and began to smooth the lid. The repetitive, familiar motion was a meditation. Each pass of the paper was a quiet stroke of defiance. Each stroke whispered the same truth. They thought they held the power because they held the money, the titles, the social leverage. They thought this was a corporate takeover. They were wrong. This wasn't a hostile takeover. This was a hostile divestment. I wasn't seizing their assets. I was reclaiming mine. I was cutting off the supply lines to an army that didn't know it was already besieged. The sanding dust gathered on the bench, a soft, fine powder. The wood beneath began to glow, its grain revealed, deep and complex and beautiful. I knew what came next. The phone would ring. It would be Mark, his voice, mix of confusion and irritation, asking why the internet was out, or why the security code didn't work. David would call, his tone laced with condescending fury, demanding to know what game I thought I was playing. But that was a problem for tomorrow. Tonight, there was only the sound of sandpaper on wood, the smell of rain and maple, and the cold, quiet hum of a plan in motion. The strategist was awake, and he was just getting started. The silence of the workshop was my sanctuary. The maple box was taking on a satin sheen under my hands, each pass of the sandpaper a quiet, grounding ritual. The cold engine in my chest idled, patient and ready. I was prepared for the first call to be anger. I was braced for bluster and threats. I had my responses mapped out, calm and unassailable facts and figures. What I was not prepared for was the sound of genuine, unvarnished panic. It wasn't my ringtone. It was the specific, shrill trill of the landline at the lake house, forwarded to my phone. A feature I'd set up for emergencies. A call from the property itself. I set the sandpaper down. The number on my screen was the lake house's. But it wasn't Mark or David's cell. They were locked out. They couldn't get in to use the phone. Unless, I answered. Hello? Jake? Jake, thank God. It was Sarah, Mark's wife. Her voice was high, strained, on the edge of tears. What's going on? The power is out. The security panel is beeping like crazy, and we can't get the generator to kick on. Mark's on the phone with the electric company and they're giving him the runaround, saying he's not on the account. The strategist in me immediately processed the data. They'd driven up. Probably for the weekend. They'd walked into a dark, silent house. Their keys useless. Their comfort evaporated. My first, fleeting feeling was a spike of vicious satisfaction. It was immediately followed by a colder, more pragmatic assessment. This was an unexpected variable. Sarah wasn't the enemy. She was a civilian caught in the crossfire. Sarah, I said, my voice even, devoid of the warmth she was probably desperate for. Take a breath. The generator has a manual transfer switch. There's a red handle in the mechanical room next to the furnace. Flip it down, then go outside and start it like a lawnmower. It's got a full tank. I heard her relay the instructions, her voice muffled, followed by Mark's frustrated grumbling in the background. Good. Let him struggle with it. Jake, why is this happening? Sarah pleaded, coming back on the line. The utility people were so rude to him. He's furious. The account management has been streamlined, I said, reciting the sterile line I'd prepared, to reflect the actual financial and maintenance responsibilities. I suggest you all head back to the city. The house is undergoing a systems update. I heard Mark snatch the phone from her. Jake, what the hell is this? He snarled, all pretense of brotherly camaraderie gone. This is insane. You can't just cut off power to a property you don't own outright. I didn't cut the power, Mark, I said calmly. A tree branch likely came down on a line in the rain. It happens. As for ownership, we can discuss the precise definition of equity later. I've prepared a detailed statement, but now isn't the time. You should focus on getting the generator running. The manual is in the drawer next to the fridge, if you need it. I ended the call before he could respond. The engine in my chest hummed a little louder. Phase 1. Confusion and logistical. Chaos was a success. But the call left a bitter aftertaste, involving Sarah. It felt unclean. A necessary casualty, perhaps. But it sharpened my resolve. This needed to be ended, cleanly and finally. The universe, it seemed, agreed, and it decided to hand me a weapon. I needed to not be in the workshop when they inevitably showed up at my apartment. I needed to move, to think. I drove to a coffee shop across town, a place with strong Wi-Fi and no memories. I was hunched over, my laptop, cross-referencing contractor hourly rates in the county to solidify my sweat equity number, when a voice cut through my focus. Jake? Jake Sorensen? Holy smokes, is that you? I looked up. Standing by my table was a man with a familiar, friendly face, a bit older, a bit more lined, but instantly recognizable. Ben Carter. We'd started at the same architecture firm a lifetime ago. He was a good guy, a talented draftsman who'd always hated the corporate politics as much as I did. He'd gotten out years before I did, opening his own small design studio. Ben, I said, forcing a smile that felt foreign on my face. Wow, long time. Too long, he said, clapping me on the shoulder. Mind if I... He gestured to the empty chair. Please, I said, closing my laptop. How are you? How's the studio? Busy. Can't complain, he said, settling in. You know, small residential stuff. People who actually appreciate good design. It's a grind, but it's honest. He looked at me, his eyes genuinely curious. What about you? You still over at the Dragon's Lair? I heard you became their golden boy for high-end client projects. The question was a punch to a bruise I didn't know was there. No, I said, my voice tighter than I intended. I left. A few months back. Ben's face fell. Oh. Geez, Jake, I'm sorry to hear that. I thought you were a lifer. Everything. Okay? And there it was. The opening. The cold engine in my chest saw it, calculated the risk, and gave the order. Go for intelligence. It's complicated, I said, letting a sliver of real fatigue show. Let's just say the family business and the actual business became a tangled mess. Ben nodded sympathetically. Families, man. They're the worst to work with. My brother-in-law tried to get me to design his man cave for cost. I told him my cost was a punch in the throat. He laughed, then sipped his coffee. What was it? Client stuff? The lake house project? I froze. Every internal alarm went silent, replaced by a single piercing tone of focus. The lake house project? I repeated, my voice dangerously neutral. Ben didn't detect the shift. Yeah, your brother, Mark, right? He reached out to me maybe 2-3 years ago. Said you were swamped at the firm, but they wanted to explore some value-added concepts for the place. Wanted to pick my brain on a potential second-story addition, a whole new deck design, the works. Said it was a surprise for you. The world narrowed to the space between our two tables. The coffee shop sounds faded into a distant hum. Mark. Reaching out to my old colleague, behind my back. He never mentioned it, I said carefully, each word chosen like a key for a lock. Ben waved a hand. Well, yeah, it was supposed to be a surprise. He said you'd been burning the candle at both ends, and they wanted to hire out the next big phase as a thank you. Wanted my rates, my availability. He chuckled. I gave him the quote. It was a solid number, but fair for the scope. He kinda choked on it. Said he'd talk to David and get back to me. Never heard another word. I figured they'd just decided to wait for you to have time. I assumed you guys did it yourselves eventually. The pieces clicked together with the sound of a vault door slamming shut. The coldness in my chest wasn't humming anymore. It was screaming. They weren't just passively enjoying my labor. They were actively shopping to replace it. They'd sought a quote for the very work I was already doing for free. They had quantified the value of my labor. Ben's number would have been close to mine, and they had looked at that number and decided the free option was better. My burnout, my sacrificed time, was just a line item they'd managed to keep at a zero cost. Betrayal wasn't emotional. It was operational. It was a deliberate boardroom decision. We kept it to a single story, I managed to say, my voice sounding miles away. Probably smarter, Ben said, blissfully unaware he'd just handed me a nuclear secret. More. Cost-effective. Anyway, I'm sorry it didn't work out with the firm. Their loss, man. Seriously. You were the best they had. We made more hollow pleasantries. He gave me his card, told me to call him if I wanted to collaborate on anything. I promised I would. I didn't move until he was long gone. I opened my laptop. My hands were perfectly steady. The invoice and sweat equity notes were still open. They seemed quaint now. Amateur. I created a new note. I titled it Evidence. I typed, Contact, Ben Carter, Carter Design Studio. Date, approximately 2.5 years ago. Initiator, Mark Sorensen. Purpose, solicitation of quote for major addition Shaw and renovation, second story, deck at Birch Lake property. Context, presented as a surprise for subject, Jake Sorensen, to thank him and give him a break. Outcome, quote, provided. Project declined due to cost. Subject was never informed. Labor was subsequently performed by subject at no cost. I read it over. It was a clinical, devastating case study in exploitation. This changed everything. This wasn't just about reclaiming what was mine. This was proof of their conscious, calculated intent to devalue and exploit me. This was the motive in the cold case of our relationship. The first call had been a skirmish. This was the intelligence coup that wins a war. I looked out the coffee shop window at the gray afternoon. The quiet strategist was gone. In his place was something sharper, colder, and infinitely more dangerous. The invoice was no longer a bill. It was a subpoena, and the investigation had just begun. The cardstock of Ben Carter's business card felt like a shiv in my hand. It wasn't just a contact. It was a sworn affidavit from a friendly witness. The cold engine in my chest wasn't screaming anymore. It had settled into a low, purring hum of absolute glacial certainty. The time for quiet reclamation was over. The time for public accounting had begun. I drove home, the city lights blurring into streaks of evidence. My apartment was a tactical operations center now. The maple box on my workbench, once a symbol of patience, now looked like a relic from a softer time. I ignored it and went straight to my desk. The evidence note was the cornerstone. But a cornerstone is useless without a foundation. I needed to build the case, not for a judge, but for the court of public opinion. Their court, their friends, their colleagues, their golf partners. I started with the invoice. I opened a fresh document, but this was no longer an itemized bill. For my brothers, this was a press release, a manifesto. Subject: a statement regarding the Birch Lake property. I began typing, my fingers flying across the keys. The tone was not angry, it was not emotional. It was the dry, precise language of a corporate memo announcing a restructuring. To whom it may concern. For the past 7 years, I have acted as the sole architect, project manager, and primary labor force for the renovation and upkeep of the property at Birch Lake, an asset held jointly by myself, Mark Sorensen, and David Sorensen. I laid out the facts, the hours, the sacrificed weekends, the diverted client work at the firm that had likely, I now realized, contributed to my burnout. I quoted the fair market value for my architectural services, my project management fees, and even a modest rate for manual labor. The total was staggering. It was meant to be. Then, I introduced Exhibit A. This expenditure of sweat equity was undertaken under the pretense of familial cooperation and mutual benefit. However, it has recently come to my attention that this pretense was false. I did not mention Ben by name. I didn't have to. The details were the damning part. Approximately 2.5 years ago, while I was actively managing the project, my brothers independently solicited a formal bid from a third-party design firm for a significant portion of the very work I was performing. This bid, which quantified the value of the labor in question at approximately, I inserted Ben's quoted number, adding a 20% premium for inflation, was subsequently declined. I was never informed of this solicitation. The decision was made to continue utilizing my uncompensated services. The implication hung in the digital air, cold and undeniable. They knew the value. They chose the free option. I concluded not with a demand, but with a declaration. As a result, I have formally invoiced my brothers for the fair market value of my services. This invoice represents not a debt, but a reconciliation of accounts long overdue. Until this matter is resolved, I have suspended all maintenance and systems management for the property. The professional relationship has been terminated. The familial one remains under review. I read it over. It was perfect. It was a bomb wrapped in bureaucracy. I attached the full itemized invoice as a PDF. Then I pulled up the contact list on my phone. It wasn't just Mark and David. It was their wives. Sarah deserved the truth after the panic I'd caused. It was their business emails. It was a handful of key mutual friends, the ones who'd always jovially called me the handy brother at family barbecues, the ones who formed the backbone of their social credibility. My finger hovered over the send key. There was no hesitation, only a final calculation of the blast radius. I pressed it. The silence in my apartment was deafening. Phase 2, social demolition, was underway. The first response wasn't a phone call. It was an email from David. The subject line was all caps. "What have you done?" I didn't open it. I didn't need to. I could imagine the sputtering rage. Mark's call came next. I let it go to voicemail. He called again, and again. Then a text from Sarah. "Jake, please, can we talk? This is getting out of hand." I felt a twinge, but it was smothered by the cold engine. This was the intended effect. The chaos was no longer logistical. It was reputational. They were scrambling, exposed. An hour later, my personal cell rang. It was a number I didn't recognize, but with a 212 area code, a New York number. I answered, my voice flat. "Jake Sorensen." "Mr. Sorensen," a crisp, professional female voice said. "My name is Eleanor Vance. I'm a partner at Vance & Crow, representing your brothers, Mark and David Sorensen." The cavalry had arrived, right on schedule. The cold engine hummed in approval. "Ms. Vance," I said. "That was fast. My clients are extremely concerned about the defamatory email you just broadcast to their personal and professional contacts," she said, her tone like polished steel. "This is a gross mischaracterization of a private family matter. You will retract it immediately. Furthermore, your unilateral actions regarding the property constitute a breach of your fiduciary duties as a part owner. You will restore access and control of all systems by 5 p.m. today, or we will be forced to seek an emergency injunction." I let her words hang in the air. She was good. She was doing exactly what she was paid to do: threaten, intimidate, and create a costly obstacle. "Ms. Vance," I said, my voice still calm. "Thank you for establishing contact. I've been expecting you. Before we discuss injunctions, I have a question. Have your clients fully briefed you on the entirety of the situation? Specifically, their solicitation of a competitive bid for my services from Carter Design Studio approximately 30 months ago?" There was a beat of silence on the other end of the line. A tiny, beautiful crack in her professional armor. I could almost hear the frantic, muffled conversation happening on her end. "My client's past explorations of project cost are irrelevant," she said, but the certainty was gone. She was on the back foot. "I disagree," I said softly. "It establishes intent. It proves they understood the professional value of the work, while simultaneously assigning it a personal cost of 0. It moves this from a family misunderstanding to a case of deliberate unjust enrichment. I have a signed statement from Mr. Carter detailing the interaction, should you need it for your files." Another silence, longer this time. "What is it that you want, Mr. Sorensen?" she asked, her voice now stripped of its bluster. It was a simple, professional question. "The retraction will not happen," I said. "The email stands as a statement of fact. As for the property, I am prepared to discuss a permanent resolution. I am offering to buy out their shares at the pre-renovation assessed value. The invoice I sent them can be considered my opening offer for that buyout. They can take that payment in lieu of their shares, and we can part ways. Or," I let the word hang there. "Or?" she prompted. "Or we can proceed to litigation," I said, "where I will introduce Mr. Carter's testimony and my complete financial analysis into the public record. I will sue not just for the value of my labor, but for damages. The choice is theirs." They can take the money and walk away. Or they can fight me and watch every single person who received that email get a front row seat to the discovery process. I have nothing left to lose. I wonder if they can say the same. I could hear her writing. I will present your offer to my clients. Please do, I said. And Ms. Vance? Tell them the investigation is ongoing. This was just the first finding of fact. I ended the call. I looked at the black screen of my phone. The legal attack had been launched. It wasn't a blunt instrument. It was a precision strike. I had forced their lawyer to become my messenger. I had backed them into a corner with only 2 exits, a quiet, albeit costly retreat, or a brutal public war. I picked up a piece of sandpaper and walked over to the maple box. The satin sheen was coming along nicely. I ran my fingers over the wood, feeling the faint, ghostly traces of my earlier work. The motion was still calming, but the purpose had changed. I wasn't smoothing the wood for its own sake. I was sanding down the handle of the knife I'd just plunged into the heart of my family, and I was getting it ready to turn. The phone didn't ring again that night. The silence was a tactical victory. They were regrouping, calculating their losses. The cold engine in my chest purred on, a patient predator. The next morning, the email arrived. Not from Eleanor Vance, from Mark. Jake. We accept your offer. The buyout. Pre-renovation value. We'll have the paperwork drawn up. Just make it stop. It was a surrender. No apology, no admission of guilt, just a white flag. It was all I needed. The legal machinery ground into motion, but it was a formality. Their lawyer, now stripped of her offensive role, became a facilitator. The numbers were crunched, the deeds transferred. The invoice, my manifesto, was formally settled as the buyout payment. I paid them nothing. They signed over the lake house, and we called it even. The final papers arrived via a stiff-backed courier. I signed them at my desk, the same desk where I'd typed the email that broke them. The pen felt heavy, final. I slid the documents back into the envelope. It was done. A week later, I drove up to Birch Lake. It was early autumn, and the air was sharp with the smell of pine and decay. The house stood silent, a beautiful, empty shell. I didn't go inside. I didn't need to. I walked down to the dock, the planks firm and solid under my feet. My work, my design. I took the maple box from my bag. The finish was perfect now, a deep, warm satin that glowed in the low afternoon sun. I ran my fingers over the dovetail joints, each one a tiny, perfect puzzle I had solved with patience and care. This was the artifact from my old life, the one built on patience and forgiveness. It had no place in the new one. I held it over the deep, dark water. I thought about the years it represented. The hope, the betrayal, the anger. I didn't feel any of it anymore. The cold engine had shut off, its work complete. All that was left was a quiet, profound stillness. I opened the lid. Inside was not a mechanism of revenge, but a simple, clean emptiness. I tipped the box and let it go. It fell, turning end over end, catching the light for a fleeting second before it pierced the surface of the water with a soft, almost polite splash. It sank instantly, leaving only a few ripples that expanded, grew faint, and then vanished into the immense, calm stillness of the lake. I felt a weight leave me that had nothing to do with the box. It was the anchor of their expectation, the chain of a debt they never intended to pay. It was gone. I didn't sell the house. I didn't rent it out. I hired a local kid, the son of the guy who plowed the driveway, to keep an eye on it. I gave him a generous monthly stipend to check the systems, air it out, and make sure no animals got in. I told him he could use the dock to fish whenever he wanted. I went back to the city. I didn't go back to the firm. The burnout wasn't a symptom anymore. It was a diagnosis of a life I no longer wanted to live. I took a few small residential projects on my own. Clients who wanted a sunroom, a thoughtful renovation. I worked slowly. I charged what I was worth. I paid myself first. The fallout for them was quiet, but total. Mark's name was quietly removed from the partnership track at his firm. The optics were too bad. A man who couldn't manage a simple family asset could hardly be trusted with a multinational portfolio. David's wife, Sarah, stayed. But the email had done its work. The story was out, and his version, the lazy, entitled brother, was the one that stuck. Their social circle, built on perceived success, tightened into a small, suspicious knot. I heard none of this from them. The silence was mutual and permanent. Months later, I was in my new apartment, a smaller, brighter place with a view of something other than a brick wall. I was sketching not for a client but for me. A design for a new box, something simpler this time. My phone buzzed, an unknown number, but a local area code. I answered, Jake Sorensen. Mr. Sorensen, this is Ben Carter. His voice was hesitant, almost embarrassed. I heard what happened. Through the grapevine. I wanted to say I'm sorry it came to that. You gave me the truth, Ben, I said, my voice even. There's nothing to apologize for. I know. It's just... He paused. I've got a client, a couple. They're a nightmare. Micromanaging, changing scope daily, refusing to sign change orders. They're burning out my best project manager. They want a call tomorrow to align on vision. He let out a tired sigh. It reminded me of your brothers, and it made me think, maybe some people just need to see the number, the real, unvarnished cost of their behavior. I looked down at my sketch. A simple, elegant box. No hidden compartments. No intricate locks. What did you do? I asked. I drafted a new proposal, he said, a new steel in his voice. I itemized every single change order they've contested. I added a 30% client management fee for all future work. I calculated the cost of my project manager's burnout and added it as a line item for workplace morale impact. A slow smile spread across my face. It wasn't a cold feeling. It was warm. You're sending them the number, I said. I'm sending them the number, he confirmed. I wanted to thank you. You didn't just get your piece. You taught a few of us how to demand ours. We said our goodbyes. I put the phone down and picked up my pencil. I finished the sketch. It was good. It was honest work. The investigation was closed. The final finding of fact was simple. I was free. The new dawn wasn't dramatic. It was quiet, earned, and built, piece by piece, on a foundation of unshakable value. My own. If this story gave you chills, smash that like button and subscribe for more stories like this.